don't know how many of you heard our interview with Rick Steiner in Alaska. He's a scientist at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. Very interesting interview, and this goes to the issue of transparency. Sarah Palin, the governor, is suing the federal government over the Endangered Species Act, right? Says polar bears shouldn't be put on the list. And her documentation are the reports of state scientists of Alaska. Now, it's a small state, and Rick Steiner, the professor, knows the scientists. He's saying, what are you talking about? Those reports do not say that polar bears are not endangered. And so he demanded to get the information, get the emails, get the reports. And the Palin administration told him it would cost $500,000. And he is fighting this for like half a year. And now it's just a matter of delay. Finally, he realizes under the Freedom of Information Act, federally, he can get it, and he gets it for free. And he sees precisely what he thought. All of this indicates the scientists felt exactly the opposite. You know, Governor Palin believes that climate change is not affected by human activity, and also believes that polar bears are not endangered. So he gets all the information, and it goes to a number of issues. You know, she doesn't use her government email because someone told her that your private email cannot be subpoenaed. So they're conducting most of their government business on their Yahoo accounts. And the Times actually did a good piece on this, the New York Times, how some fool wrote to Governor Palin on her government account to talk about some political appointments that he felt were in order. And he was written back to, you've used the wrong account. You used the government account. And he writes back, whoops. I think it's something like sarah.gov at yahoo.com, something like that. And apparently recently they were hacked into. So Fox invited me on to say, you think that that's okay that her email was hacked into? And I said, no. Actually, I do think that everyone should have their privacy respected. So it's interesting that when you hack into her private accounts, that's where they're going to find out about government business. But we shouldn't know, I guess, about it if it was in her private email accounts. Anyway, the issue of transparency, of open government, these are absolutely critical issues. But going to the issue of climate change, of course, we don't have to go as far as Alaska to see the repression of government information. David and I have a chapter in the book called Some Don't Like It Hot. And we are talking about the 2004 presidential election approaching, something strange happening at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. The normally steady flow of news releases about glaciers, climate change, pollution, and other earth sciences slowed to a trickle. An October 2004 news conference to present new information about ozone and air pollution from a new NASA satellite was ordered postponed until after the election by the Assistant Administrator for Public Affairs at NASA. White House appointees instructed NASA's public affairs officers to shift the focus from Earth science to President Bush's stated desire to return a man to the moon and eventually to Mars. Political appointees at NASA had figured out a novel way to resolve the discrepancy between Bush administration rhetoric and scientific reality. They would just erase our planet. NASA's historic mission since its establishment in 1958 has been the expansion of human knowledge of the Earth and of phenomena in the atmosphere and space, which is why global warming falls squarely within the agency's purview. From 2002 to 2006, NASA's mission statement read, to understand and protect our home planet, to explore the universe and search for life, to inspire the next generation of explorers as only NASA can. In early February 2006, unbeknownst to most of the agency's 19,000 employees, the mission statement was quietly changed. The phrase, to understand and protect our home planet, disappeared. Instead, the mission became to pioneer the future in space exploration, scientific discovery, and aeronautics research. Earth had to be erased for a reason. The science about Earth, namely the alarming and incontrovertible evidence of global warming, conflicted with the fantasy being spun by President Bush and his oil industry backers that climate change wasn't really happening. President Bush declared in July 2001, my administration's climate change policy will be science-based. He must have meant science fiction because from the moment the Bush administration took power in 2001, officials set out to undermine, distort, and suppress science that didn't serve their political ideology and financial backers. Vice President Cheney made it clear who was setting the environmental agenda when he huddled behind closed doors with his former colleagues in the oil industry and virtually allowed them to write a new national energy policy to their liking. And then we go on to talk about one of the most famous crusading climatologists in the world, James Hansen. America's preeminent scientific expert on climate change and the so-called father of global warming science. He's the longtime director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies. He's been sounding the alarm about global warming for more than 2 decades. As a result, he tangled with climate change deniers such as Oklahoma Senator James Inhofe, who has called global warming a hoax and dismisses Hansen as a NASA scientist and alarmist. Hansen's adamance about the threat of global warming has made him a punching bag for the deniers and a target of smears. So Hansen's troubles deepened in December of 2005 when he released data showing 2005 had been the warmest year in at least a century. He called for rapid reductions in emissions of greenhouse gases. This caught the attention of the Bush administration. The problem was not global warming, it was James Hansen. Hansen quickly received word that his upcoming lectures, postings on the Goddard website, scientific papers, and any interview requests from journalists would need to be reviewed by the NASA public affairs staff. And there was a threat. Top NASA officials relayed a warning to Dr. Hansen about dire consequences if he continued to make such statements. To help rein in Hansen, he was assigned his own personal political minder, a new 24-year-old presidential appointee in the NASA Public Affairs Office. Deutsch's primary qualification for the job of muzzling the nation's premier climate scientist was that he worked as an intern in the war room for the 2004 Bush-Cheney re-election campaign. Once ensconced at NASA, Deutsch set about promoting what he felt was the real scientific priority of our time, ensuring that intelligent design, a repackaged version of creationism that posits the universe and all forms of life are created by an intelligent designer, aka God, was given prominent play in the agency's public pronouncements. We go on to talk about the level of repression stopping the words global warming often vacuumed off government websites. Ultimately, George Deutsch was forced out because James Hansen spoke out, and not because of what he alleged he did. But his resume said he graduated from Texas A&M, and he hadn't actually graduated from college. He'd just taken a few courses there. So Hansen speaks out, right? He speaks out in Congress. He is risking everything to do this, but he feels if he doesn't, he's risking much more. And he said, I have no legal expertise, but I'd like to raise 3 questions. Number 1, when I testify to you as a government scientist, why does my testimony have to be reviewed, edited, and changed by a bureaucrat in the White House before I can deliver it? Where does this requirement come from? Is not the public who paid for the research, are not they being cheated by this political control of scientific testimony? Number 2, why are public affairs offices staffed by political appointees? Their job nominally should be to help scientists present results in a language the public can understand. They should not be forcing scientists to parrot propaganda. Indeed, during the current administration, NASA scientific press releases have been sent to the White House for editing, as I discuss in my written testimony. If public affairs officers are left under the control of political appointees, it seems to me that inherently they become officers of propaganda. Point number 3. The primary way that the executive branch has interfered with climate science is the control of the purse strings. This is very, very effective. Last February, a year ago, just days after Hansen charged publicly that he'd been muzzled by NASA, the executive branch slashed the Earth Science Research and Analysis budget. That's the budget that funds NASA Earth Science labs such as mine. They slashed it retroactively through the beginning of the fiscal year by about 20%. That is going out of business level of funding. The budget's an extremely powerful way to interfere with science and bring scientists into line with political positions. Some people have joked that at about the same time the White House brought in a science fiction writer for advice on global warming, he said, a reference to Bush inviting the sci-fi author and global warming denier Michael Crichton to the White House in 2005. But Hansen said, this is not a joking matter. We need more scientific data, not less. And James Hansen and his colleagues have prevailed because they dared to break the silence, which is so important.